The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Surovell.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel kind of weird asking the body to vote in favor of this bill. I'm one of the last people in the world that supports criminalizing new offenses or expanding penalties. But I recently went through an experience which sort of brought home to me why this bill is necessary and just how dangerous this behavior is. And I want to thank Delegate Anderson for his attention to this, Delegate Klein, who I think is a big part of why this bill is moving, Courts Committee, who I know put a lot of work into this. I want to tell you about a client of mine, or I should say a family who lost their child. Families had a son named Kyle. He was 19 years old, graduated from high school in Northern Virginia, went to college, and he came home from college for the summer and got a job out. He lived in the Oakton area, and he got a job out in Loudoun County at a restaurant. And one night when he was coming home around 10 o'clock at night, yes, sir. He was coming down Route 7, and his car ran out of gas as he was coming up the hill. The road was 6 lanes wide, had a grass median. It was straight, pretty much level. He was about 40 feet from a stoplight. So he turned on his blinkers, he got out of his car, and he started pushing his car to get it off the road because there was a curb next to him and he couldn't just push it onto his shoulder. At the same time, behind him, 40-year-old guy named Jason Gage had recently left his ex-wife's house after having just dropped off his children, spending the day with his ex-wife, who he was hoping to reconcile with. Mr. Gage, as he left his ex-wife's house around 10:20 in the evening. At 10:21, he received a text message from his ex-wife wishing he could have stayed. He received another text message from his brother about 2 minutes later. About 4 minutes after he left, he replied back to his ex-wife, and then he replied back to his brother. And then another few minutes later, he sent another message to his brother, and then he sent another message to his brother. 7 minutes after leaving, he sent another message to his brother. His brother wrote back to him after about 9 minutes after having left the house. And about 10 minutes after having left his ex-wife's house, Mr. Gage plowed into the back of Kyle Rowley's car without braking, without swerving, with 2,000 feet of straight, clear, level road between him and my client's car. My client's child, Kyle, was immediately thrown. He landed in the middle of the road. Neighbors heard the accident, came running out to see what had happened, and then witnessed 3 more cars run him over while they were trying to stop him. It's because of this kind of incident, which is exactly why we need to do something. Mr. Gage was immediately arrested. His car flipped. He was knocked unconscious. When the police arrived, they couldn't figure out why this collision had occurred. There were no skid marks. Hazards were on. There was no witnesses, save for a person who was about 100 yards ahead who saw the collision in the rearview mirror. It didn't make any sense. They interviewed Mr. Gage after getting his cell phone and seeing he'd sent text messages. He said he couldn't remember anything. He couldn't remember what he was doing. But it was pretty clear from the way the collision occurred what he had done. So the Commonwealth attorney sat down with the detective and tried to figure out what to do. And they kept coming back to the same problem, which is that in 2009, this body had adopted a secondary infraction for texting while driving. And they couldn't figure out a way to charge this with involuntary manslaughter as a felony or may be reckless. And they struggled with this, and they researched it all around the country, trying to figure out a way to charge this guy with involuntary manslaughter, because what he did was basically as bad as plowing into somebody while drunk. Commonwealth attorney came to the conclusion they could not bring a felony. They brought it as reckless driving. They went to trial. And at the conclusion of trial, what they had was very little evidence. They had a collision, no skid marks. They had no witness. All they had was text messages and an accident. And for those of you that don't practice criminal law, in order to prove reckless driving, you have to prove something about the driving behavior in order to convict somebody of reckless driving. The case law is crystal clear on this. The Supreme Court of Virginia in Powers versus Commonwealth held that the occurrence of an accident does not lead to reckless driving. You have to show what in the driving behavior led to that. And all we had was 7 text messages spread over 10 minutes and a collision. And the judge from the bench said that the only driving behavior that he could ascertain from the evidence was texting. And the General Assembly had decided that texting while driving was a secondary offense, punishable by a maximum fine of $25. And that absent making it a traffic infraction or a crime, it was not possible to charge this individual with reckless, or convict this individual of reckless driving. Although the judge said that had that texting statute not passed, he may well have convicted him of reckless. And it was because of this incident that happened in this accident that happened, it's because of what happened in that courtroom that I think brought to everybody's attention the legal problems with what was enacted back in 2009. It's my understanding that these issues were raised in the last floor debate back in 2009. I wasn't here at the time. But that we plowed ahead anyway in the name of doing something about this. And it goes to show how important it is to be careful in drafting criminal statutes. They are read very carefully, picked apart by thousands of lawyers, and there are all kinds of unintended consequences. They're not drafted right. Now, I continue to have concerns about this bill the way it's drafted. I'm going to vote for it, but I'm still concerned about it. And I just want to tell the body how dangerous this behavior is, which is why I'm voting for it, notwithstanding my concerns. Virginia Tech did a study in 2007. They looked at 103 truck drivers, 46 trucks who were driving over 18 months. The average driver was 40 years old. They looked at 60,000 hours of drive time over 3,000 miles. And what they did is they correlated truckers' driving behavior with video cameras looking at how dangerous their driving conduct was. They found that a text message takes a driver's eyes off the road an average of 4.6 seconds. And that's an average. So sometimes more, sometimes less. At 65 miles an hour, that means it's akin to driving with your eyes closed for over the length of a football field and a half, with your eyes closed. When they correlated all the different behaviors they looked at, they found that personal grooming, putting on makeup, only increases your risk of an accident by about 4.4 times. Reaching for an object, 3 times. Looking at a map, about 7 times. They looked at smoking, listening to a CB radio, a lot of other things. But texting while driving increases the chances of risky driving behavior by 23 times. There was not another type of driving behavior that comes anywhere close, not even half of that, in all the behavior they studied. National Safety Council says that 28% of all crashes today involve some form of cell phone use. And we all know that young people all over the place are doing this all the time. And the last thing I'll say, I recently saw a church sign, which I thought summed this up well, Mr. Speaker. It said, "Honk if you love Jesus, but text while driving if you want to meet him." And I think that sums it up perfectly well. But we need to do something about this. We need to do something about this. I think this bill is a step in the right direction. But I think we'll be back soon to clarify some of this, because I think we need to go further. Right now, under the way this is written, you can Facebook while drive, you can browse while drive, you can look at email while drive, you just can't type anything in. You could even play Angry Birds while drive the way this is written. We need We need to cover all forms of electronic distractions inside vehicles and not just texting. I would urge the body to vote for the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.